Like most 8-year-old boys, Khidr loves toy cars and wants to be a policeman like his daddy when he grows up. But it was because of his father's job that Khidr suffered the unimaginable. He was kidnapped when he was just 6 years old by al-Qaida in what used to be the heart of the Iraqi insurgency, Fallujah. What followed was even more horrific, an ordeal that lasted for 2 years. When he tells us how they would torture him, I can't tolerate it, his father Abdul says. I start crying. Khidr shows us the traces of torture that remain on his tender body. The physical wounds have mostly healed.
So he's saying that they just drove the nail into his leg and then they pulled it back out. And they also used to put the cigarettes out on his back. There's a number of scars here.
He says they also pulled out each of his tiny fingernails and broke both his arms. He remembers them laughing at the pain they inflicted. He shows us where he was standing when masked men stormed into his house, screaming for his father. I told them he wasn't here, his grandmother says. They called me a liar and said they wanted his son. They ripped Khidr out of her arms and knocked her to the ground, destroying the house before they fled with the 6-year-old. The kidnappers called me, demanding the release of some prisoners or they would slit his throat, his father tells us. But I couldn't let murderers back out on the street, so I said to myself, let my son be a martyr. 2 years later, police in Taji, some 45 miles away, received a tip that terrorists were holding kidnapped children. Al-Qaida has historically kidnapped children for money, to pressure officials, and even to carry out terrorist attacks. These are pictures as police had Khidr retrace his steps the day after he was freed. He saw me in uniform and ran to me, his father remembers. I went flying towards him to hug him, but people said, be careful, both his arms are broken. We held each other all night. Abdul Qadir says Khidr's kidnappers are still at large, and he still fears for his son's safety, but says he won't quit the police force. He says people like him have to keep fighting the terrorists. Arwa Damon, CNN, Fallujah, Iraq.